Hello and welcome to another of our regular webinar updates. This month, as we await the outcome of the recent Ofqual consultation on further adaptations to the assessment arrangements for various qualifications, including functional skills, we thought it might be useful to take a step back and spend a bit of time talking about some of the core principles of assessment. They're relevant regardless of the type or types of qualifications you might be working with, and some of the assumptions behind them are clearly relevant to some of the discussions going on right now about possible alternative arrangements. They're also crucial in the case of mathematics and English skills, bite-sized qualifications, where all of the assessment is portfolio based. Okay, now we're settling into this regular pattern of 3 live sessions each month. We do wait until the last of these 3 sessions has taken place before a recorded version is made available via the Resource Hub. As usual, we will try and answer a few of your questions later on in this session, but for now I've switched off that facility, so please hold your thoughts over the next few minutes. Again, whilst we're on the subject of questions, a reminder that a collection of the Q&As from the last few webinars can be found on the Functional Skills qualification pages. We will keep adding to the document so it gradually gets bigger and more comprehensive, so it's always worth a look through in case that question that's on your mind has already been addressed. Since the questions almost always relate to functional skills, you'll find the rolling questions on the 4748 qualification page under Centre Documents. Also, if you are listening live, the document has been attached for you. And if you're listening to the recording, please do still send in your questions to the pre-employment inbox. That's pre-employment@cityandgirls.com. So now for this month's in case you missed it. We've mentioned this before. We just want to reiterate that now we're running an onboarding webinar for any individual or organisation new to delivering maths, English or ESOL qualifications with City and Girls. They take place on the first Wednesday of every month at 10 AM. We're usually quite flexible with the agenda depending on who joins the actual session, but broadly it's a chance to go through a few fundamentals such as where to find key documents, how assessments can be accessed or booked, and information about other stuff such as these webinars and the practice sharing networks we also run. It's only an hour long, so it won't take up too much of anyone's time. You'll find sign-up details of the new to us sessions on the Resource Hub. They're aimed at new individuals as well as new centres, so if you have a new member of staff, it might be useful for them to join one of these sessions. We've also mentioned this before, but we're continuing to host a series of practice sharing networks where practitioners can come together and talk about their experiences. They're not a training session, they're really about learning from each other rather than chalk and talk stuff from us. We've 3 network themes on the go at the moment: Functional Skills English, Functional Skills Mathematics, and for anyone who didn't join the networks, we ran on this topic last year, a session that looks specifically at speaking, listening and communicating. To sign up, just head for the Resources Hub and follow the links. Each session is held roughly once a month, and we've recently added dates right through until June. Finally, we're very conscious that these webinar sessions are very England-centric and that colleagues in Wales or Northern Ireland won't necessarily find our constant chatter about functional skills, Ofqual, ESFA and bite-sized qualifications all that relevant or even interesting. So we've now set up a regular series of keep in touch sessions, less broadcasty than these webinars and much more conversational, so we can talk about anything specific to essential skills. Ideas that are worth discussing and sharing, anything geographically specific in terms of COVID related issues, etc. We held one session with Northern Ireland centres at the end of January, and that's now going to become a monthly appointment. We're envisaging the same sort of format for Wales. We'll be communicating details and sign up information on our email alert systems. So once again, there's a gentle reminder to sign up if you haven't already done so, and check your preferences. Before we move on, here's a quick recap on the current state of play in terms of access to functional skills external assessment. Test at Home is now available to those in a position to make use of it. There is an approval process to go through, but after that you'll have access to all of the additional guidance and instructions to use this. Please do bear in mind it's not possible to facilitate the functional skills ICT assessments through Test at Home, and this is only available for Level 1 and Level 2 functional skills English, reading and writing, and functional skills mathematics, and not for entry-level functional skills. Meanwhile, we've added another testing venue for centres currently unable to facilitate functional skills exams. There's details about this on our functional skills COVID pages. It's worth noting here that we are able to accommodate functional skills ICT candidates at these venues. Okay, let's update on where we are now with sample on-screen tests. We confirmed last month that it's not currently possible to access sample functional skills tests through the Open Assess platform. We are still working on a solution to this and will of course keep you posted. In the meantime, could we reiterate that it is now possible to access sample on-screen tests for functional skills, ESOL, Skills for Life Reading and the Principles of Maths English qualifications via the web pages for these qualifications. This involves downloading an app called Surpass Viewer, but there's instructions for doing this on each of the relevant qualification pages. In the case of functional skills maths, it's also worth saying that the navigation tests are also available via the 4748 qualification page, so these can be used to help learners familiarise themselves with the various graph, table, chart creator tools. In addition, the paper sample tests are still available as normal from the documentation tab of the qualification pages. Crucially, this is where you'll find the mark scheme for any of these tests, including for the on-screen formatted versions. Okay, on to the main topic for this month. We're increasingly being asked for guidance about making assessment decisions and determining appropriate forms of evidence for the 3847 bite-sized mathematics and English skills qualifications. Since these are portfolio assessed, there's quite a lot of freedom to approach the gathering of evidence in different ways and present it in different forms. But that can sometimes be a bit of a scary idea too, if you're not familiar with working in this way. And of course, having to make assessment decisions is also central to the speaking, listening, communicating component of functional skills English and at entry level across all subject areas, along with most of the ESOL Skills for Life suite. We're not going to get into detailed assessment theory here, but we thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about some of the guiding principles of our assessment team work with on a day-to-day basis with dealing with our external assessments, as well as recapping on how the role of an assessor, or indeed that of an internal quality assurer, differs from that of a teacher or tutor. Anyone in any kind of assessor role needs to be clear about what it is they're trying to measure and how they're going about doing so. That's true of contemporaneous evidence, things that are right in front of you, as much as also the case for anything you might be trying to review retrospectively. These are just a few thoughts. Those of you with long enough memories to recall the days of key skills, when portfolio building and assessment was such a major part of what we did, might be better placed to appreciate some of these concepts. If you have worked more recently with the 3847 bite-sized mathematics, English skills units and qualifications, you will also probably have become more used to switching between the role of a teacher-tutor who is there to develop, support and coach a learner, and an assessor who is impartial and is there to give a decision on a learner's performance at a given time. The ability to take a step back and make objective decisions is absolutely critical here. One of the criticisms levelled at internal assessment is the extent to which unconscious bias might come into play, and we have to remember that these can be both positive and negative. And of course, in recent years, there's been a general trend away from relying too much on internal assessment for high-stake qualifications. Another skill that doesn't necessarily come naturally to those less used to wearing an assessor's hat rather than teaching the subject is the ability to look holistically at a candidate's performance rather than just judging individual pieces of evidence in isolation. A piece of free writing might demonstrate the ability to convey information and ideas effectively, but hopefully will also show accurate SPAG. And depending on how the task was set up, it's likely the candidate had to read and absorb some information in order to produce this piece of text. It's also about understanding the expected standard, the relevant subject content statements and scope of study in the case of functional skills, the unit learning outcomes and assessment criteria in the case of ESOL, or the bite-sized qualifications. They're what needs to drive and guide assessment decisions. Teachers spend significant amounts of time with learners and builds up their capabilities, which then turns into a perception of how that teacher expects the learner to perform. If in an assessment the learner performs differently, unconsciously the teacher may compensate for that in their assessment decisions. It's also worth referencing also, as we get lots of questions regarding how to and is there a specific way this should be done. It is entirely up to the centre which system they use, and the EQAs will work with the centre's choice. For example, page numbers are a clear option to use for the 3847 bite-sized qualifications. Also, if several criteria are being claimed on one page, they can be listed at the side of the relevant section or refer to another page or question. So the simpler the method, the easier it is for your quality assurer and the EQA to find the evidence. Another aspect of the 3847 bite-sized qualifications is that these can be completed at home, which is very useful at the moment. It goes without saying that individual assessors' decision making needs to be standardised. And this is why the process of internal quality assurance is so crucial in ensuring a level playing field for all learners. There can be a tendency for this to be approached from a very process-driven perspective, fixating on percentage sample size and the like, that is at the expense of really thinking about the underlying purpose, which is having confidence that all learners' work is being judged consistently and fairly. Standardising is not just a box-ticking exercise. It is an important way of helping assessors support each other in their decision-making. We touched on some of these points during last November's webinar when we were focusing on the bite-sized qualifications, but many of these points apply more generally to the portfolio assessment and the process of making assessment decisions. Again, anyone schooled in the world of MVQs will be familiar with all of these principles, especially the idea that pieces of work will often hit more than one criterion or even more than one unit. The key thing here is having a reliable and robust system for referencing evidence, so assessors are consistent in their practice, but also so internal and external quality assurers can follow and see how decisions were arrived at. It's worth quickly picking up on the idea of authentic evidence. We use this expression to describe work that has been produced by the learner and where the assessor is confident it is their own work. The assessor is responsible for determining the authenticity of evidence, and in turn the centre's internal quality assurance processes will ensure this is done correctly and consistently. We have mentioned authenticity of evidence, so it's worth discussing vaccine here also. Any evidence gathered needs to be valid, authentic and have currency and be sufficient. Valid, which is like Ronseal, does what it says on the tin, and that sometimes has face validity. For example, a professional discussion about a mathematics skill would have a poor face validity. However, a discussion for speaking, listening, communicating would have very high face validity. Authenticity, so it's not just about signing a declaration to say it's their work. How else can assessors authenticate work? They could, for example, compare it to other pieces of evidence or follow up with discussions with the learner. It's about how confident they are in the authenticity of the evidence. And currency, so how recently was the evidence gathered? Is it reflective of the learner's capability at the time of the assessment? And sufficient, how much is too much evidence? This isn't just about volume of pieces of evidence, it's also about quality of evidence. Is the evidence of a sufficient quality to meet the standard? You may need to consider how many times something needs to be evidenced. Again, without getting drawn into the detailed requirements of any particular qualifications, these documents are always worth referring to. Section 6 of the Centre Manual contains quite a lot of information about the role of an assessor and the assessment process. where our quality assurance requirements, or OQA, is the go-to place for understanding or expectations around consistency and standardisation. All of these documents can be found in the Centre Document Library on the cityandguilds.com site. Just before we move into questions, City and Guilds has recently published a social impact report, and we're keen to continue to understand the difference our qualifications make to learners, organisations and wider society. We're looking for organisations that would be willing to share their experiences of supporting learner resilience and progression. If you're able to help with this, please get in touch with our foundation team using the email address shown here, foundation@cityandguilds.com. Which brings us on to question time. So I'm switching on the facility now, so please ask away. The usual caveat applies. We're not necessarily able to answer all of the questions here and now, but as always, we will lift all of these questions and incorporate as applicable to the rolling Q&A document. If you are listening again to the recording, please send in your questions to pre-employment@cityandguilds.com and we will add them to the document also. And now, to draw this webinar to a close, I'd like to thank you again for joining. We are aware of how precious your time is and how difficult it can be to even grab half an hour for this. I'm going to sign off now, but we'll keep the webinar open for a little while so you can still post your questions. So it just remains to stay safe, and we will see you again next month. Thank you.